a chip, take a dip. It's time to feed your brain. We got the myths, we got the legends. It's spicy and it's true. It's Guess So You Didn't Know.
Hey there, everybody listening today. This is the Queso You Didn't Know show. If you didn't know, I'm your host, Queso, and joining me as always is the unbeatable.
Toberto Simpson, as always and forever.
Right on, right on. Now, everybody, I think we're really hitting a stride here. I think you would agree, wouldn't you, Toberto?
Always, always.
Now, if you didn't know, you're gonna know, and if you know, now you know, because this is obviously all part of our Revolts and Rebellion series. Now, we've covered Haiti, we've covered Stano, we've covered the German Coast Uprising. I figured because it's been months since we hit anywhere in Asia, we're gonna spend a little time over there. And to help us segue into our next arc for the show, we're gonna go to no other place in this world but Japan. Yes, everybody's heard of Japan, I'm sure. You've heard of Japan, haven't you, Talberto?
Always. It's one of the bucket list trips, I'll say for myself.
I feel you on that. Now, people, it's more than just cherry blossoms and Godzilla. We're going to Japan, but specifically, we're going 19th century Japan. We're going to talk about a man who is a walking contradiction. Who is this, you ask? Queso, who is this? Well, I'll tell you, everyone. It's Saigo Takamori. Now, I'm sure you've seen the Tom Cruise movie, The Last Samurai. Who hasn't, right? The Hollywood version, where Ken Watanabe plays a guy named Katsumoto, who's honorable, poetic, and fights with swords against machine guns. Well, that character is based on Saigo. But the real Saigo wasn't just a rebel in the woods. He was the George Washington of Japan before he became its Benedict Arnold. He is the architect and the iconoclast. He was the giant, literally, huge for a Japanese man of his time, who helped overthrow the shogun and restore the emperor. He built the modern Japanese military, and then in a twist of fate that is honestly heartbreaking, he ended up leading a suicide charge against the very soldiers he trained. His life spans the Bakumatsu era, the violent, chaotic end of the samurai age. He is a man driven by Bushido, the way of the warrior, and a world that was rapidly switching to railroads and telegraphs. So today, we are going to find out why the first general of the Imperial Army became the last samurai to die on the battlefield.
I'm gonna be real with you, as I always am. Right along with the Matrix. Maybe The Last Samurai is one of the flicks that I'm due to see that I haven't because I don't know, it's just one of those things to where you feel like you're indebted to seeing certain flicks. Like I've just felt like I just had to see. But between me and you, the same way I couldn't really take Sigourney Weaver playing an African queen in the movie Gods of Egypt. I don't know. Maybe he's just seeing a was it ancient Asian depicted, The Last Samurai, that movie? Was it depicted as if it was in ancient Asia?
No, it's set in the same time period. The best way I can describe it to you, because you're not missing much. Have you ever seen Dances with Wolves?
I think I heard of it.
Have you seen the Avatar, where they're blue, not the one about the airbender?
Yeah, I'm familiar enough with it to know what you're talking about, but
They're all
yeah.
the same movie. They're all the
Okay.
same movie. You know, it's kind of a weird white savior complex where literally I'm more advanced and more civilized than you guys. So I'm going to come into your culture, learn about it, fall in love with it, and stop the people that are trying to kill you because you couldn't do it yourself without me. That's essentially all it is. Like The Last Samurai, I'll say, I remember seeing it when I was younger, and it was good not because of Tom Cruise. It was good because of everyone else despite Tom Cruise. If Tom Cruise was just a fly on the wall, it would have been a better movie.
Okay. It's cool seeing the, I guess, forefather of Japanese society in one way or another. You know, that's the way I see you're framing it. What can I say? Bushido Brown all makes sense now because he is a hell of a warrior himself. But speaking of this warrior, I think we're due to get into the next section. You feel me?
We're going to jump into a little bit of context. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And Bushido, it'll make a lot of sense as this goes on because, as you said, he's the father of modern Japan, basically. Like, not just Japanese culture, but more importantly, the modern Japanese culture as it is today. He's the reason you had kamikazes in World War II, more or less, because of the way he portrayed Bushido and the way Japanese society ran with it afterwards. So, Saigo, our boy Saigo, he's born in 1828 in Kagoshima, right? Which is in the Satsuma domain. Satsuma here is important. It's in the far south of Japan, in Kyushu. I'm sorry if I'm butchering any of these names. I'm trying my hardest, everyone. But I am not the smartest when it comes to linguistics. Bear with me. The samurai there were known for being tough, conservative, and fierce. Saigo was born into a low ranking samurai family. He wasn't a lord, he was a bureaucrat with a sword, basically. But he stood out because of his size. He was nearly 6 feet tall and built like a linebacker in an era when the average height was much shorter. He had a presence. He grew up steeped in two things: Wang Yang Ming Confucianism. This is a philosophy that emphasizes action. It says knowing what is right isn't enough. You have to do what is right. Integrity is everything. He also grew up, number two, in poverty. His family wasn't rich. He understood the struggles of the common farmers. That combination, the action oriented ethics and empathy for the poor, made him incredibly charismatic. His early career is defined by his friendship with another guy named Akubo Toshimichi. Keep that name in mind. They were childhood friends, grew up on the same street, and they would change history together before eventually trying to kill each other. Saigo rose through the ranks because the Lord of Satsuma recognized his talent. He became a key player in the Kobugari movement, the idea of uniting the court, the emperor, and the camp, the shogun. But as the 1860s rolled on, Saigo realized the shogun had to go.
Mm. And really, this just puts me in the mind frame of a conversation I had with you about the fact that Jesus is always portrayed as what, as far as his occupation, a carpenter, right? And just the fact that in carpentry in those days, in order to actually do it, you can't just be a guy of look at me trying to go all conservative and stuff. I went from saying motherfucker to a guy, but you'd have to be a guy of more of a built frame, you know? You'd have to be a little more stocky. So if Jesus did exist, it just means so much more for him to be a guy who's talking about just being meek and humble and turning the other cheek when he's somebody who's probably built like the rock or some shit. Like that means a lot more. And no offense to anybody's religion, of course. Like I of course have my views on it, but no sacrilegious shit here. Just saying it's important for history because to know history and things like that because it just gives you the mind frame and the facts that there are people who are Christ like at the very least we can say because Christ is just a title that many people had before him and just really outside of that who's there there's no debate on whether or not they existed like this guy to be built like Shaq and you're still somebody of good character, good quality, and just all about doing what's right and just being fair and decent. That means a lot.
And you'll see that so much in this story. The comparison you drew is very real because he does more or less get his own disciples. He gets a following. He's a man that's trying to unite and unify, that doesn't want war, but when war comes, he's not going to let his people die because he wants to stand idly by. It really is a compelling story in that sense that this man started off as somebody that's like, look, I just want us all to come together like butt cheeks, like, you know? But at the end of the day, if that's not your prerogative, when shit goes down, and it does go down, and I will say, it might be one of his Peters, Pauls, or Marys that make it go down, he's still there to help pick up the pieces and try to bring it together.
And that's what it's all about. Just another thing as far as the whole what's it called Satsuma personality. So would you compare that maybe to possibly being like what the religious leaders and stuff like that of Jesus's time were? Like that's the equivalent because this guy, he's being basically the opposite of that, like the antithesis of that philosophy. And would you assume like the people who were of that philosophy, they're like the religious leaders of that time? Because I'm taking him like being the antithesis of that, just like Jesus was the antithesis of the Pharisees and stuff like that at the time.
You are onto something. Now, Satsuma is where he lived, and you'll see Satsuma is where he built his thing, his rebellion, so to speak. And so it's more the comparison of Jesus of Nazareth. He's Saigo of Satsuma, and you are 100% right though. He is the antithesis of more or less what is to come to be the government after the civil war they fight, the Boshin War. Because the shogun essentially, you think about knights and castles and stuff, right? So the shogun was more or less like what the lords and ladies would be that served a king, and the emperor is the king. Well, in the Japanese version of it, because the shogun controlled all the samurai, it'd be like if the lords and the ladies had all the power and the king was more or less a puppet. So he really is the antithesis of that because as they're trying slowly to kill off the samurai eventually, you start to see he's the one that gives them refuge and tries to still give them purpose.
Okay, I can get into it. And all in all, I think just seeing his certain strategies and things play out, just seeing the ins and outs of certain equations he put together, it'll be a hell of a show within a show.
Without a doubt, because as I mentioned, there's the Boshin War, and that's where we're going to skip ahead to in his story. So it's a civil war between the shogun's forces and the emperor's forces. Saigo Takamori is now the commander of the imperial forces. He's fighting for the emperor. He isn't just a brute. As you said, this is a man that can lay traps. He can play chess. He's a political genius. He creates a secret alliance called the Sacho Alliance with the Satsuma and Choshu domains. These two regions hated each other, but Saigo, along with Sakamoto Ryoma, realized they had to team up to beat the shogun. The climax of this war is the fall of Edo, or modern day Tokyo. The Imperial Army is marching on Edo. The shogun's forces are dug in. It looks like the city, which was the biggest in the world, one of the biggest in the world, the biggest in Japan at the time, is going to burn to the ground. Thousands of people will die. But Saigo does something incredible. He meets with the shogun's negotiator, a guy named Katsu Kaishu. They sit down, two samurai, and they talk. Because Saigo respected Katsu, and because he wanted to save the city, he negotiated the bloodless surrender of Edo Castle. He allowed the shogun to step down with dignity. He saved the city from fire and ruin. This is the peak of Saigo's career. He is the hero of the restoration. He proved that a warrior's greatest victory is one where no one dies.
I guess, I mean, I can't say I spoke that shit into existence because, it of course was something like you already had, typed out and all that good shit before I said it. But it just fit right into it because seeing how he plays out in certain equations, it means a lot to see certain code of conduct within a certain leader, when you see that he reflects certain personality traits that mean a lot, because when you say the greatest victory is one where no one dies, like that's some shit straight out of Sun Tzu's mouth. It sounds like it's all about just not ruling with an iron fist, but ruling in a way that's the most efficient, that means the most, and just is overall the best for you and the people that you're ruling over, for them to have bestow more faith and trust in you.
Exactly. It really does speak volumes to his character, and it's something you're going to see time and time again that even when it does come to bloodshed, he realizes if I don't fight these people, more people will die. And I think that also is the mark of a good leader, that sometimes when it comes to wars and shit, as a leader of people, there are going to be people that die. Sometimes there does have to be war. It's inevitable. But to realize if I sit back and I don't do anything, more people will die. I don't want to fight, but I have to stop that. I think that is a mark of somebody that is choosing to do that rather than, oh, this war is completely avoidable. I just want to see people die.
While we're, of course, keeping it historical, as far as keeping it somewhat current, were you fully enthralled, is what I'm trying to say, within the hype or within the importance of how much and how many people, and not just people, but young people, were really out there dying in the early 2000s thanks to a certain war? Did you really, get the gist of it while it was happening?
I remember it. I do remember it very good. And it was, yet again, like you said, it was one that was avoidable. It's one that we set up 30 years before it happened. And it was something over oil. It's the same reason why we went into Venezuela, man. It's avoidable. And it definitely does give you an appreciation for these type of leaders that realize I don't want to fight a war, but I'll win a war if I have to.
Yeah, and because that's something that I really I really didn't get until a little bit after it happened. Like, man, it was a lot of not just people, but young people who really, because I've heard all the anybody who grew up or was alive during that era, you've heard countless George Bush jokes about, how he got us into a pointless war and shit. But just the amount of people and just young people who died, I didn't really get that until a little bit afterwards. I'll
Well,
say
it's
like
not even just the death, though, because there was only a couple thousand people that died. It was the people that came home without arms and limbs because they got hit by IEDs. It's like the woman that used to work at the Walmart over here in the auto department. Whenever somebody would throw a tire down from the rack and it hit the ground, she'd tackle whoever she was by and cover her head. It's the things that you don't necessarily see in the papers and stuff. You hear about people dying, you don't hear about those ones coming home and never being able to live.
right, right. And before we bounce back into our historical groove, you know what I mean? Overall, do you think really that the overall reason, because politics affects our lives so much in ways it's just so subliminal, but it does, like I said before, I think just in conversation between me and you, a, a large deal of the reason why we love the 90s so much, of course, it was great, just music and culture overall, but the economy was great, you know? And overall, do you think the overarching reason of why 2016 is so missed by us, especially recently, is because it was by and large really the last year where you remember not waking up every day thinking, oh shit, what is the president up to? What's going on in politics? Because I remember watching this interview from 2017, speaking of old Zach TV interviews and stuff, and they're like, because of course he's from Chicago and they got into that in politics, and they're talking about Donald Trump, and they're like, yeah, that motherfucker always doing something. And I was like we still saying the same shit about him that we were saying in his like first term, the first year of his first term, because that interview was like right smack dab in the middle of 2017, and like he was doing that shit then, like on Twitter and stuff, just tweaking. Like, but yeah, that's really the gist of it.
And honestly, boy, he's only gotten crazier. At least we survived the first term. This term, man, there's days I get up and I'm like, ooh, are we still gonna be here as a country in 3 years?
Yeah, it's it's something, man. It's something.
But you want something to
Bob,
compare it to, man. Let me tell you, somebody that kind of thought their whole world was ending politically and such forth. Our boy Saigo. There's a reason he's the last samurai, right? Because the emperor is restored after this war. The bloodless winning of Edo Castle. The Meiji era begins. Japan is modernizing fast. Trains, Western suits, haircuts, all important. Like you said, subliminal, but it makes a difference. When you cut your hair, you don't think much of it. When you put on a new suit, you don't think much of it. But when you put it all together, it starts really rapidly changing who you are and who society is as a whole. He sees the new government becoming corrupt. The samurai class, his people, are being stripped of their swords, their stipends, and their dignity. They are unemployed and they are angry. This leads to the Saigon debate of 1873. This is arguably the most controversial moment in Saigo's life. Saigon means the argument for conquering Korea. Korea had refused to recognize the Japanese emperor. The Japanese government felt insulted. Saigo proposed a plan, but it wasn't a standard invasion. He proposed he would go to Korea as an ambassador. He would go alone, unarmed. He fully expected the Koreans to insult him or even kill him. He argued that his death would provide the moral justification for Japan to declare war. He was literally volunteering to be a martyr to give the unemployed samurai a new purpose, a war. But his childhood friend, Obuko Toshimichi, stopped him. Okubo said, along with the other pragmatists, they had just come back from Europe, the Iwakura mission. They saw how powerful the West was, and they argued, we cannot fight a war right now, we are weak. We need to build factories, not invade Korea. The emperor sided with Okubo. Saigo was crushed. He felt the government had lost its honor. He resigned in protest and went back home to Kagoshima, and 600 of his best military officers resigned with him. The government just lost the army.
yeah, that's, that could be it. And this is around the time of really Western powers producing most of the GDP, a vast amount of the GDP in the world. And this is this is really the turn of it all, because at a certain point, if you look it up, Asian societies were about half and half to a little bit over to where European ran societies were, but of course we know that flipped. This is just a it's just a pretty nice excerpt of those times and events that circumvented around that.
Well, and you really see because Japan was super far behind from all these other people. They had spent years in isolation, something like that, around there. That's why the samurai lasted as long as they did. That's why their feudal system lasted as long as it did. It wasn't until Matthew Perry, not the actor, but the Navy officer, took a couple of ships over to Tokyo and forced them into trade relations. These were big steamships. The motherfuckers in Japan saw these and they're like, what the fuck is that? And that was 1854. And so they're seeing this shit and they're like, oh my God, we've never seen anything like this. How far behind are we? And then you see the telegraphs, you see the expansionism, because you're very well versed in this war. When did the one with Cuba happen? Wasn't that the one we talk about, right?
Oh yeah. Well, you're talking about the Spanish American War, you
That's
mean?
it. That's it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That happened in, yeah, 1898. Yeah,
So
that was it.
they're seeing all
Well,
of this. They're seeing Britain take over India, Britain taking over Australia, Britain taking over Canada. You know, they're seeing all of this for the first time because they just spent the last couple hundred years. It was more like 200 years in isolation. So they're like, we got to play catch up. If we start a war now, everyone will die because we're using swords and they have repeating rifles.
And to jump ahead in the story somewhat, they played a hell of a game of catch up, if you ask me. I mean, you know what it is. The in Japan right now, their subways and shit alone are just so much more maximized in technology than us. And what does that say for other stuff?
100%. And you see it start here. Like I said, this is really the birth of modern Japan, and they run with it hard. So Saigo goes home to Kagoshima. He wants to retire. He wants to farm, hunt with his dogs, and be left alone. But he's too fucking famous, right? Thousands of angry unemployed samurai follow him to Kagoshima. They look at him like a messiah. To keep them out of trouble, what does Saigo do? He opens a series of private schools known as Shigako. On the surface, they teach Confucianism and farming. In reality, they are paramilitary training camps. They are teaching artillery and tactics. Kagoshima basically becomes an independent state. They stop paying taxes to Tokyo. The central government, now led by his old friend Akubo, they become terrified. They send spies to Kagoshima. In 1877, a rumor spreads that the government spies are there to assassinate Saigo. The students at the private schools snap. They raid the local government arsenals and they steal the weapons. Saigo wasn't involved in the raid. He was actually out hunting. When he heard what happened, he reportedly said, "The heavens have forsaken me." He knew it was suicide. He knew they couldn't win, but his code of honor dictated that he wouldn't abandon his followers. He famously said, "I will offer my body to you." He agreed to lead the Satsumo Rebellion, or the Sinin War, which had just begun.
Hmm. What do you make of the rumors of, you know, assassination?
I think it's easy to believe because with what they're seeing, he has a target on his back. I can't tell you if there really was any credibility to them or not. I think Japan, up until this point, as I said, you think samurai, you think these warriors out there having these huge clashes, and that's not entirely wrong, but there was a bureaucratic side to it. I think the government maintained that bureaucracy. I do. And I think that it wouldn't have necessarily been an assassination. It would have been, we're bringing you in for a hearing. We're going to have a court case. We're going to see if we should exile you, if we should execute you. I think they rushed it because they're students. A lot of these guys are young, dumb, and full of cum, and now they want to have some fun, so to speak. They see their chance to get back at the Japanese government, and they decide we can justify this by saying we think he's going to assassinate Saigo. So I could see it from either direction, it being true or it being something along these lines.
Hmm. And I just love seeing the humanity of him between me and you, just as a little side note, the fact that he hates being famous.
And
That
that's the
that's
best leader of all, isn't it? That a leader that is a great leader is one that doesn't necessarily want to be a leader.
hmm because it's like it reminds me of the whole there's a Malcolm X documentary called Make It Plain, and it was called that. That's just an old school saying within the black community in particular. And basically, what it means, Malcolm would say it basically every time when he got to a certain point before his speeches. It would basically mean, introduce me, introduce my name, say what I'm gonna talk about, and yeah, bring me on. He didn't like the whole here's your great Malcolm X, your leader, your redeemer. He didn't like all that. Just bring him on. And he was say what you want about him, as stand up as you get. There's FBI footage of him being unknowingly recorded and refusing to tell them anything, you know. But it nice little, I think it plays a lot into his conduct too, not just as far as how ethical he is, but how much he thinks to teach Confucianism on the surface, but really to make it a military camp at the same thing. It just says a lot about how a warrior is always thinking ahead.
Positively. And I think it shows respect for the tradition too, that he was born a samurai. Even if the world around him changes, one, he wants to give these unemployed samurai a home, but two, he doesn't want it to die because in his mind it still serves purpose, it still has honor, and without samurai, what is his country? I almost got that vibe doing the research that I think had they left him alone, eventually maybe they would have tried to rise up. Whether it was a new leader after he died or what have you, it might very well likely have happened. But I think just as likely there would have been a good period where it just was what it was. It was a way for the samurai to exist in private.
Right on, right on. And do you think that whole philosophy and attitude just pervades way down to modern Japanese society? You think it still persists to this day?
100%. Because as you'll see when we get into the guts of what happens to him later on, his demise, his ending, and all this, and how the Satsuma Rebellion ends, you do see this really bleeding into Japanese culture, from anime and manga to the way they conduct politics to the way they look at themselves on an individual level. That you have this in your DNA. And I think you see, especially like I said, you wouldn't have kamikazes in World War II without his belief in Bushido and the way the society translated it. Because quite literally, the reason they did the kamikaze dive bombing, killing themselves, was based off of a Bushido principle that they held at that time in Japan.
Yeah, man. And before we dip off, maybe that could be something that's said of maybe not just Asian, because I was gonna dip off into the whole Middle Eastern side of things. You know, once again, not to be sacrilegious, but there are a certain sector of people who practice the Islamic faith who will gladly sacrifice themselves, strap a bomb to their chest, all about Muhammad. You know, it's just the whole thing of I'll sacrifice myself for the cause.
And if you look at Christianity, they have martyrs, which are the same exact thing.
Hmm. But to be fair, Islamic people and people who practice more of that, I'll say more of that Far Eastern or Middle Eastern type of thing, I think, just as far as numbers go, more of them are more devout in that right, you know.
That's definitely a fair statement. But I'm just pointing out to any listener that wants to go, oh, well, you're leaning this way or you're leaning that way. What we're pointing out is a universal human truth. It's not exclusive to one religion or one area of the world.
For a fact, for a fact, you know. And all in all, kamikazes of that day are cool, but the kamikazes of those times will, I think, will be good to get into that.
And get into it we shall, because now we're hitting the blood and guts of the last samurai. And when I say blood and guts, ladies and gentlemen, I mean we are getting into some blood and guts, but a lot of guts, because it can't be stressed enough. These motherfuckers had guts for days. It's the real life version of The Last Samurai. Like I said, you have Saigo's army, about 25,000 to 40,000 men. They are samurai. They have spirit. They have swords. They actually had rifles too, specifically Snyder Enfield rifles, but they ran out of ammo quickly and had to resort to swords. Against them is the Imperial Japanese Army, 30,000 conscripts, peasants, led by Saigo's former proteges. And to put that in perspective, they're outnumbered 7.5 to 1 to 12 to 1. That is a big disparity, even if you take the guns off the fucking table. But the turning point comes in the siege of Kumamoto Castle. Saigo makes a tactical error. Instead of marching straight to the capital, he stops to besiege this castle. You might be asking why. It's because this castle was incredibly important. If he stopped going for the castle, they could cut off his supply lines. It was a fortress for the Imperial Army. Basically, to avoid this castle meant he was guaranteed to be fucked in the long run. But as you'll see, he's kind of damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. Saigo makes a tactical error. Instead of marching straight to the capital, he stops to besiege this castle, as I've said. Now, it turns into a meat grinder. The siege lasts for 54 days. 54 days. You know, longer than a few weeks. This was months. This was months that he was here sieging this. The Imperial Army arrives with reinforcements. The fighting is brutal. There is a famous battle called Tabaruzaka. It rains for days. The mud's waist deep. The samurai threw down their wet guns and they charged with swords. It was the last time in history that the sword challenged the gun on a massive scale. And, ladies and gentlemen, I think you can discern this yourselves, being smart individuals. The gun won. Saigo's army was shattered. They retreated, bleeding and starving, back toward Kagoshima.
Mm. Now, it doesn't get more symbolic than that, I feel, not just a turning point in Japanese history, but overall world history. Just one of those moments, and probably the breaking point to a certain degree. It was, you can argue, the final moment in history where on a major scale, or probably on any scale, where a certain society said, okay, to hell with the sword. We're going to have to move up to another level of civilization when it comes to war. And that's, of course, the gun, you know?
And you see it happen gradually in Europe and other places in the world, but really, exactly, that it was truly the last time. They were like, you know what? No more swords. No more swords. But the Japanese samurai, that was their life. That was everything. As you'll see in the future episodes we do, because we have one all on the history of samurai coming up in a few weeks. But that being said, you live by a code, you die by a code, and I think there is something to be respected by that.
Yeah, no lie, no lie. But just overall, it makes me think about the Charles Bukowski quote. I think it is just about revolution being something that sounds beautiful, but that's where it stops. But just as far as the whole starvation part of it, and just to think about the little things when it comes to certain body parts needing to be decapitated right there on spot in order to survive. And even if you're not the person who needs your a limb chopped off, if you have to do it right there at the moment, stuff like that, it's kind of sick. Like, I'm the type of person who has a fit camping. So imagine being out in war in those type of environments.
In mud, waist deep, and rain with fucking dirty ass drawers on and nowhere to shit with toilet paper. Amen.
Yeah, like people make warriors look sexy and stuff like that in movies and stuff, and oh, he's just such a hot, just general battle. But in reality, kind of in comparison to what I said about being in the kitchen, in restaurant kitchens and stuff, like, yeah, there's attractive females around, but the essence of being in a restaurant kitchen is nothing sexy, just as much as, or even more, is nothing sexy about being out in battle. I'll say that.
Or even being at home back then, man. Like, and I know it's fictitious, but there were castles and knights and shit. Every time Game of Thrones had come on, men and women both, they'll be like, oh, she's hot. Oh, he's hot. Oh, they're all so sexy. And then I'm just sitting here like, bro, imagine what that room smells like. Dirty pussy and asshole.
Yeah, man. Like people bathe on a monthly basis if they were somewhat, I mean, what would be considered being in good habit of it, you know?
They got one, and I'll have to loan this book to you. It's called Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England. The only people that showered daily were literally the people whose job was to go to the river and rake the shit out so that it would clear out into the ocean because you're
Mhm.
covered in shit all day, essentially. Yeah, no, it is not a sexy life. It is not a fun life. And you're 100% right, man. The way they try to like romanticize warriors and battle and knights and samurai, it would have been a very, very bleak life that smelled bad 90% of the time.
Oh yeah. All the glory comes in the end, like decades and decades later when they make stories about it in movies, and they make it look glamorous. That's the reality of it.
Exactly. Like you look at Alexander the Great, you want to talk about one of the most romanticized ancient figures. Like, they always make movies where he's so dreamy. He's so strong and beautiful and he's a conqueror. Bro, he smelled like dirty booty cheeks and he died at the age of 40 from dirty water.
Yeah, or okay, look this up right now if you can, which I know you can. XIV is what as far as Roman numerals?
XIV, that would be 14.
So that's Louis the 14th. That's the Sun King as he's known throughout history.
Yep, yep.
Hmm. Okay. From what I heard, he had many mistresses. You think that's just a bunch of dirty sex?
Oh, dude, all that was dirty sex. Even if you were having sex with a king or queen, that was dirty sex.
Mm.
Dirty booty cheeks and pig ass. I don't know, man, but it smelled awful. Was it they did a
No.
joke on Family Guy where they're making fun of like Cinderella or something. And so, Lois comes in as Cinderella with the dress and the glass slippers and Peter's Prince Charming. He goes, "You're so beautiful." And she goes, "And you smell slightly less worse than everyone in the room."
Right, right, right. Yeah, no lie, no lie. I
Especially the
guess
way
it,
they were inbreeding, dude. You know them motherfuckers stank.
oh yeah. So the Palace of Versailles, you think it smelled like a bunch of ass?
It had to, man. Or it's the thing where they overcompensate with like incense and shit, and then it smells like ass and incense.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I can get that. That's a thing too.
Patchouli oil, man. It's a damn thing. It's a goddamn thing. And
Hmm.
you'll see the loss of the romanticism as this story continues because it's September 1877 at this point. The end of the line. Saigo is down to his last few hundred men. He's wounded. He's cornered on a hill called Shirayama, overlooking his hometown. He is facing 30,000 Imperial troops. The government commander, Yamagata Aratoma, who used to admire Saigo, orders a total assault. They bombard the hill. And I truly get the feeling in the research I did, it's almost like a fuck, I don't want to attack you. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this, but I have to do this. Attacking my guests because I can't go home unless you do. And that's how much people respected him. So Saigo is hit in the hip or the thigh by a bullet. He can't walk. He turns to his lieutenant, Beppu Shinsuka, and says, "Shinsuka, my friend, this place will do." He kneels down to face the imperial palace in Tokyo. This is the moment of seppuku, ritual suicide. You know, sits down on his sword. Some accounts say he managed to perform the final cut. Others say he was too injured and his friend simply beheaded him to spare him the pain and capture. The last samurai died there on the hill. The rebellion died with him. When the imperial generals found his body, they wept. They washed his head and treated it with respect. Even though he was a traitor, he was still Saigo.
It just I don't know because now that you said that, it's making me think of Western society having traits like that, the whole ritual suicide. And it's not dark compared to that, but in other anyways, you're familiar with the Russian mafia, of course.
Yes, sir. Yes,
hmm
sir.
And it was on a show, but I'm sure it's got some truth in it. But it was basically a guy who betrayed his responsibility to the Russian mafia. And in order for him to not have his wife and child murdered, he would have to perform a suicide in public and, say that he shamed himself in the mafia and stuff like that. It's kind of reminiscent, I'll say.
It's very similar, but here's where it diverges because the history of seppuku is really wild, and we will get into it. Like I said, we're covering samurai ninjas and everything in between as we continue on into the next saga after our revolts and rebels. So, essentially, and this is where the Bushido comes in with the kamikazes. A true warrior doesn't retreat. That's why in Japan they treated all the POWs in a very, very not so humane way because in their eyes they were less than cowards, they were less than men. They surrendered on the battlefield. Bushido states that to keep your honor, you die in battle if you're about to lose. To retreat is the greatest shame you can bring your family. So seppuku started where you lay on the sword, have your head chopped off, mainly because if you were losing, it kept your honor intact because you proved I wasn't afraid of death. I didn't retreat. I was scared of nothing, so I took my own life to show this.
hmm Yeah, I guess it's the old saying, a soldier dies but once, a coward dies a thousand deaths.
And that would be super, super true to the way the samurai and the Japanese all saw fighting a war. And like I said, it really does hold into the modern era for Japan, and it's something they really keep going. You'll see in his legacy, Saigo died a traitor and he was stripped of all honors. But then something strange happens. The public refused to hate him. They loved him. Within a decade, the emperor pardoned him posthumously. Why? Because as we've been saying this whole episode, Saigo represented the soul of Japan, that people felt they were losing in the rush to modernize. He was a symbol of sincerity, loyalty, and tradition. There's a famous statue of him in Ueno Park in Tokyo today. If you go there, you see this pudgy, friendly looking guy in a casual kimono walking a dog. The statue is famous, but Saigo's wife hated it. When it was unveiled in 1898, hey, look, that's the year we had the Spanish American War. See what's going on around the world? When they unveiled it, she shouted, "My husband never looked like that." She hated that he was depicted in casual clothes, looking sloppy. She wanted him in his general's uniform. But the public loved the casual Saigo. They loved the man of the people image. That dog, by the way, is named Soon. Saigo loved dogs. He used to go hunting to escape politics. And finally, the pop culture legacy. The Last Samurai movie takes huge liberties. Ken Watanabe survives way longer than Saigo did. And Tom Cruise isn't real. But it captures the spirit of why we are obsessed with him. He's the tragic hero who chooses to die for principle that he knows is obsolete. He is the ultimate romantic failure.
It's kind of like a sympathetic loser type of thing, and Adam Sandler, and basically kind of sort of everything he does, but specifically the wedding singer type of thing. I gotcha. I gotcha.
100% that you want him to win even when he's losing. And he's a nice guy. Nobody, like I said, nobody wanted to do this. The guy that had to go and have his men shoot them down, I literally, from the research, I hear him going, fuck, 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 I don't want to do this. Fuck, can you just stop? Can you come home? Can you surrender? Like, I don't want to have to kill you.
Right, right. Yeah, I can kind of grip on to that. And just overall, it says a pretty decent degree about just what society is willing to look past for certain attributes to shine more. brings back the whole even in this case, it's not an example of a man's personal failures outweighing his great deeds because his failures in this case weren't even personal, but society in large still decided to look past that.
And I think it shows yet again another universal truth of humanity that, and maybe it's just because we're a country that was founded by a bunch of outlaws and rebels, technically, you know, pseudo terrorists. Everybody likes a rebel. And I feel like that's a universal thing. Somebody that's fighting and speaking truth to power.
Yeah, contrarians are always going to have a place within history, like especially if it's in a manner at that, because that's the thing with Eisenhower and Kennedy. Eisenhower was Mr. 50s. He enlarged kind of represented the 50s, and Kennedy, he was the guy who they would post up as the poster boy of the 60s, the new age, the new era for that time, even playing different sports and stuff than Eisenhower would be seen playing in the White House. And our guy, Mr. Dirty Sex, Louis XIV, the Sun King, he would, you know, build the temple of the palace of Versailles as opposed to the Louvre. Yeah. Um I'm decent with linguistics myself, but when it comes to French shit, it's kinda, you know,
Versailles and the Louvre.
the Louvre. Mm,
Well, and then
yeah,
you take it a step further and you look at modern people. I feel like Bush is the boomer president, Obama is the millennial president.
Bush is the boomer, Obama. Yeah. That's a nice way to look at it, I suppose.
In a way, in a way. But, ultimately, it is a story, I think, as old as time that everyone wants somebody that is a Robin Hood. As long as you're a Robin Hood. Because sometimes you can be a rebel and be a real piece of shit and kill a bunch of innocent people and not really have anyone on your side and only be succeeding because you have outside money from a different source or you're using funds you've made illicitly doing shit. And ultimately, though, I think the world, even if it's a losing rebel that's fighting like a Robin Hood, they're gonna love him.
Yeah, I suppose. Steal from the rich, give to the poor.
And I'd almost say he's more akin to me. You remember the story of John Henry and the steam shovel, right? And that's almost what this guy makes me think of. That the reason we like him, he died putting his heart into it to show he was not obsolete and the system still had a reason for him. And it was kind of the opposite. He was obsolete, but he put the heart in it. We respect it. The same way with Saigo. He put the heart in it. He was, as you said, a kind, good, great leader. There was everything you look for in someone that's leading people, and it made both sides it hard not to like him. And so ultimately, even though he was obsolete, you still want to root for the guy because you want a place in the world for someone that has that kind of character.
Yeah, that's the thing. We just to give the idea that good things out there exist, even if it's fantasy, or in this case, it's not really. You just want to let some let some positivity out there, have some light, even if it defects society to a certain extent or not.
I completely agree. And sorry, ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun, but I'm going to go ahead and put on the glasses. It's that time again to hit our little Springer moment. So, what have we learned from the life and death of Saigo Takamori? We learned that progress always has a price, and sometimes that price is paid in the blood of people who made the progress possible. Saigo built the machine of modern Japan, then he threw himself into the gears to try and stop it. He teaches us that there is a difference between being smart and being true. His friend Okubo was smart. He built a nation. Saigo was true. he built a legend. In the modern world, we are usually told to be pragmatic, to compromise, to survive. Saigo reminds us that there is a seductive, dangerous beauty in refusing to compromise, even if it kills you. He was the last samurai, not because he was the last man to hold a sword, but because he was the last man who believed the sword still mattered. Take care of yourself and each other. As always, this is Queso. You didn't know. We're about to sign off, ladies and gentlemen, but join us next week as we start getting into the Taiping Rebellion. It's going to be some crazy shit. Mr. Talberto, any closing thoughts? Anything you'd like to plug? Take the floor, sir.
Well, I think this is the point to where if we were a little more high tech, I'd have some, I'd have the song Crazy Story by King Vine come in and play for the announcement I'm about to make. But we aren't there yet. We'll get there. But I think they'll be pleased to know, like I let you know, I finished the rough draft of the first parter of the King Von series, and I think this show deserves a little twist. And why not start with drill music? But all in all, just keep on supporting you guys. We do it for you and ourselves a bit, but got to be a little selfish. Instagram, TOLBERT Simpson, Believe the Cheese, world's most dangerous podcast, and we run this shit. See you, people.